"You don't have to get upset," he said, as if I'd just been handed a wrong coffee order, not an eviction notice from my own son. I didn't answer right away. I looked at the envelope again. My name on the front. My son's handwriting. A stamp from the county office. He was standing in my kitchen, the same kitchen I'd once let him paint yellow when he was 12, even though it turned out blotchy and streaked. His voice still had that calm tone he used as a teenager when he'd broken something and wanted to soften the blow. Only now he wasn't 12. And this wasn't a lamp or a plate. This was my house. "You can take all the time you need to process," he added, glancing toward the window, where his new black SUV was parked like a silent threat. "But the papers are official." I finally looked at him. Really looked. Gerald was 52 now. A man with silver at his temples, a leather belt that cost more than my monthly groceries, and shoes that hadn't seen a scuff in their life. His mouth tightened when he saw my expression. Not sad, not apologetic, just prepared. "Why?" I asked, not loudly, not angrily, just one word. He sighed as though I were a stubborn child again. "Mom, you've said yourself, it's getting harder to keep up with everything here. The stairs, the yard, the maintenance. It's a big property. And now that we're moving..." "Moving?" I interrupted. "To New Bern," he said. "Bigger house, better school district for the boys. And we'd like to use the proceeds from this place for the down payment. It just makes sense." I looked around. The curtains I'd sewn myself. The wooden table James built before his stroke. The chair with the uneven leg Gerald used to wobble in during dinner, grinning every time I told him to sit still. This was the house where I lost my husband. The house where I raised my son. And now, apparently, the house that would fund his fresh start. "You said I could live here as long as I wanted," I said. "That was before," he replied. "Before we knew how much it was worth." I stared at him. "I mean, before we knew how much you're struggling, Mom." He corrected himself, catching the words too late. "We're just trying to help. You shouldn't be alone here. It's not safe. You can move into one of those assisted communities." I held up my hand. I didn't want to hear the rest. Not the brochure. Not the talk about independence in a 500-square-foot room with beige walls and no stove. I turned away and poured myself some tea. My hand shook a little, but I made sure he didn't see. "You've already made the decision," I said, setting the cup down. "So why ask my opinion?" He stepped forward. "Because I care. Because I wanted to be honest. You can take a few weeks. I'll help with the move." "The move?" I repeated, like I was practicing a foreign word. "Yes." He nodded, like it was settled. "Just think it over, please. Don't be mad, Mom." I looked at him again. Not at the man who handed me flowers on Mother's Day, or used to call me for advice about his taxes. I looked at the man standing in my kitchen with legal papers in hand and the word efficiency on his tongue. "I'm not mad," I said finally. "Not yet." He took that as some kind of blessing, smiled awkwardly, and let himself out. The door clicked softly behind him. I stood there for a long time, the teacup warming my fingers, the envelope on the table untouched. Outside, the wind rustled the last of the maple leaves across the yard. My knees ached, my chest was tight, but I wasn't crying. At 79, you learn to tell the difference between heartbreak and insult. This wasn't heartbreak. That had already come and gone years ago when James died. This was insult, plain and sharp. The phone rang. I didn't answer it. Instead, I picked up the envelope again, opened it, and read it through. twice. My name, his signature, all legal, all clean. Then I walked into the living room, sat in James's old recliner, and turned on the lamp with the crack in its base. I wasn't mad. Not yet. But I would be. The next morning, I folded the eviction notice in half and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk. Not because I intended to forget it, just the opposite. I needed to clear the kitchen table. I needed space to think. Outside, the fog clung low to the grass, and the porch boards groaned under my steps as I brought in the newspaper. The same porch Gerald once painted blue for my birthday. Now the paint was chipped, and so was the memory. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and set out 2 mugs out of habit. One for me, one for James. I hadn't broken that habit in 8 years, and I wasn't about to now. By noon, the kettle had whistled twice, but I'd barely touched my toast. My body sat at the table, but my mind paced the hallway. Around noon, I took out the deed. I kept it in a manila folder, tucked behind old tax returns and the warranty for a refrigerator that had died 3 years ago. His name was on it, not mine. I remembered that day. The lawyer's office had smelled like carpet glue, and Gerald had promised it was just to avoid probate. I had trusted him, my only child. My James had already passed by then, and I was so tired of forms, signatures, institutions. Gerald had said all the right things. "You'll always live here, Mom. It's just paperwork." And I had nodded, grateful even. Now it was paperwork that could push me out of my own bedroom. At 2:15 p.m., I heard tires on gravel. My stomach clenched before I even looked through the curtain. She was here. Mallory. Gerald's wife. Blonde, polished, always in a rush. She stepped out of the passenger side in tall boots that weren't built for gravel, and her lips curled into something like a smile when she saw me on the porch. "Helen," she called. "I thought I'd stop by. Hope it's not a bad time." I didn't answer. Just opened the screen door and let it slam behind me. She followed me inside without being asked. The scent of her perfume filled the hallway, something cold and expensive. "I know Gerald already talked to you," she began, settling into the armchair like she owned it. "And I just wanted to say, this isn't personal." "Isn't it?" I said calmly. "It's about planning," she went on like I hadn't spoken. "About ensuring you have the support you need. Assisted living has come a long way. There's one in Raleigh with a salon, activities, even yoga. You'd love it. Have you ever seen me do yoga?" She laughed lightly, not realizing I wasn't joking. "You'll be safer there. And let's be honest, you've said yourself it's hard to manage the house alone." I looked at her hands. Perfect manicure. Not a callus in sight. "I manage just fine." "Still," she said, her voice softening into the patronizing tone she used with her own mother, "this house is too much. Too many stairs. Too many things that can go wrong. You'd be more comfortable somewhere. Modern." "Tell me the truth," I said. She blinked. "This isn't about comfort or yoga. It's about money." Mallory's lips twitched. "It's about opportunity. The market's hot. We can get a good price now and roll it into the new property before rates go up again. Gerald's job isn't as stable as it used to be. The boys need better schools. You could help everyone just by vanishing quietly," I finished for her. She didn't deny it. "I baked today," I said suddenly. "Cranberry scones. Your boys used to love them." She looked confused, but I got up and fetched the plate from the counter. Still warm. Mallory took one, out of politeness, and bit into it. "Still delicious," she said. though she looked like she'd rather be chewing sawdust. "I want you to do something," I said, sitting down again. "Tell Gerald not to come back here with papers. If he wants to talk, he can talk, not serve. He is, after all, my son." Mallory set the plate down. "Helen—" "I trusted him," I continued. "I gave him this house, signed it over, believed him, and now he wants to trade me in like a used couch." She looked uncomfortable. "I think that's unfair." I nodded. "You would." When she stood up, her smile had faded. "I'll let Gerald know you want a conversation, but I hope you'll think about the future." "I am," I said, "for the first time in a while." She left without finishing the scone. After she drove away, I wrapped the remaining pastries and placed them in the freezer. Waste not. Then I took out a notepad. Clean page. Clean lines. At the top, I wrote, "People I can call who still know who I am." And I began. I didn't sleep much that night. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels personal. Around 4 a.m., I got up, pulled on my robe, and padded into the living room. The heater clicked on. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. Inside, the air held that heavy stillness of a home that knows something is ending. I sat by the fireplace, where James used to stack wood like a mason laying bricks. He'd always say the same thing when the logs finally caught flame. "There it is, the honest kind of heat." And it was James I kept thinking about. He would have been livid, not loud, but cold, the way he got when he was disappointed beyond words. We bought this house together in 1974, a little rough around the edges, but full of promise. We built out the porch ourselves one summer, sweating in the Carolina sun, arguing over the angles, and laughing about it later with lemonade in hand. We raised Gerald in this house, buried James from it. After his funeral, the lawyer had suggested a will update. Gerald was so helpful back then, insisting on handling everything. When he brought up transferring the deed just for ease later on, I hadn't questioned it. I didn't want to think about dying. I just wanted things to be settled, like he promised. What a fool I'd been. I still had the original paperwork. I opened the safe in the bedroom closet. Combination 11/21/55, our anniversary. Inside were birth certificates, James's military discharge letter, and the notarized deed transfer. My signature, neat and naive at the bottom. Gerald's name alone on the next line. I stared at it for a long time. Then I picked up the landline. "Good morning. This is Rachel from Fenton and Brock Legal Services." Her voice was too cheerful for 8:07 a.m. "Rachel, I need to speak to someone about property rights and tenancy agreements." There was a pause. "Are you a current client?" "No, but I was married to James Kirkwood. He did our taxes with your office for years." She transferred me to a woman named Diane, who sounded older and knew how to listen without interrupting. I explained everything: the house, the deed, the eviction notice, my age. When I finished, Diane cleared her throat. "Mrs. Kirkwood, first, I'm sorry you're going through this, and second, you may have more rights than you think. North Carolina law has protections for seniors in situations of coercion or undue influence." "I signed it willingly," I said. "I just didn't expect this outcome." "Willingness isn't always informed," she said gently, "especially when it's family. Tell me, do you have a copy of the transfer documents? Any correspondence?" I told her I did. She asked me to bring them in. "There may be a way to contest the transfer, especially if your son promised lifetime residency, even verbally." "Would that hold up?" "It depends. But if there's any indication of financial exploitation, yes. Do you have anyone who can support your account? Witnesses, emails, even old letters? I looked toward the cabinet. James's old cigar box sat on top, where I'd tucked his last birthday card to me and a bundle of other things I hadn't touched in years. I might, I said. Then let's meet, Diane said. I have an opening at 3 today. Bring everything. After I hung up, I sat quietly. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from a strange, sharp thing I hadn't felt in years. Resolve. I didn't know what would come of it. Maybe nothing. Maybe a battle I couldn't win. But I wasn't going to be pushed out of my own home without using every bit of the spine life had carved into me. At 1:45, I was dressed and out the door. The deed, the letters, the photos, all in a canvas tote that used to hold groceries, now holding my case. The sun was out. My hip ached on the steps, but I didn't curse it. I took each stair slowly, deliberately. I was still in this house, and I intended to be, for as long as I decided. The law office was in one of those new buildings that look like they belong in a catalog. Polished floors, clean white walls, glass doors that whisper when they open. I felt like I was walking through someone else's life. Diane met me in the lobby. She was in her late 50s, smartly dressed in navy, and had a handshake that said she meant business. "Let's sit down," she said, and led me into a quiet office with a long table and a pitcher of water I didn't touch. I laid everything out: the deed, the notarized papers, the card from Gerald years ago promising, "You'll always have your home." Even the thank you letter he'd written after I helped with their down payment. I brought the envelope with the eviction notice, too. Diane read it all silently. "He gave you this in person?" she asked, holding the notice like it was something unclean. "Standing in my kitchen," I said. She nodded and leaned back. "Legally, it's his name on the deed. But morally, ethically, you've got a strong position, especially if you can show this wasn't just a gift, but something given under the condition of security. He promised you a lifetime right to stay?" He did. "Said it out loud more than once? Anyone else ever hear that?" I hesitated. "James, before he passed, and my grandson, Andrew. He knows what Gerald promised." Diane made a note. "That helps. A lot, actually. Courts don't look kindly on adult children who maneuver aging parents out of homes they've lived in for decades, especially when it's done under the guise of convenience." "What about the house being in his name?" "Ownership isn't everything. If we can prove you were misled, or that there was an implied tenancy with lifetime rights, we can file for a stay on the eviction, possibly even reverse the transfer. It's not guaranteed, but I've seen it happen." I looked at her. "And how long would that take?" She shrugged slightly. "Depends. A few weeks, maybe a few months. But the moment we file, everything stops. No one can legally make you leave." Something loosened in my chest. Not hope. No, not yet. But something near it. "I want to move forward," I said. Diane smiled, and it wasn't the kind of smile lawyers use to close a deal. It was the kind a woman gives another when she sees she's still got fight in her. "All right then," she said. "Let's get started." By the time I stepped outside, the sky had turned overcast. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, tote bag in hand, watching people pass by. Young ones, brisk ones, always in a hurry. When I got back home, the first thing I saw was Mallory's SUV in the driveway. I took a breath and squared my shoulders. She was standing on the porch, typing something into her phone, looking irritated. She straightened when she saw me. "Helen," she said. "I was just stopping by to..." "To what?" I said. "Check if I'd packed yet?" Her face twitched, just for a second. I thought we might talk. Funny, that's not how Gerald handled it. She looked away. He thought it would be easier coming from him. We didn't want you to be surprised. I wasn't surprised, I said, unlocking the door. I was insulted. She followed me inside, uninvited again. Helen, this isn't an attack. It's just practicality. We can't hold two properties. Gerald has debts. The boys need better. I needed better once too, I said, turning toward her. When Gerald was 10 and James was laid off, we had nothing but this house, a beat-up truck, and each other. I didn't sell my parents' land to make things easier. I made do. Mallory crossed her arms. Times are different. No, dear, I said. People are different. She opened her mouth to speak, then thought better of it. I've hired a lawyer, I added. We're contesting the deed transfer and filing for a stay. Her eyes widened. You're serious? As a heart attack. She glanced at the photos on the mantel. Gerald as a boy. Gerald at graduation. Gerald with her on their wedding day. You're going to drag your son into court? I poured myself tea. No. He dragged himself. She didn't say another word, just walked out without finishing her sentence, her perfume trailing behind her like smoke. I stood there in the silence, holding the cup steady in my hands. It was beginning. Andrew showed up the next day without warning, just as I was taking laundry off the line. He parked his old sedan by the curb, not in the driveway like his parents always did. He walked up the path, slow, hands in the pockets of his jacket, the way he used to when he came home from college, unsure whether he needed to apologize for being gone so long. I saw the way he scanned the porch, the roof, the flower beds. He hadn't been here in months, but I could tell he remembered every crack in the steps. Hey, Grandma, he said. Hey, yourself, I replied, setting the basket down. You here to serve me more legal papers? His mouth opened, then shut. No, he said finally. I just came to see you. I nodded. Then come in. He followed me inside and kicked off his shoes at the door, like he always used to. I poured us tea, he still took 2 sugars, and we sat at the kitchen table. The one where I used to lay out his spelling words. The one where he cried after breaking his arm falling out of the oak tree. I didn't know, he said, once we'd sat in silence for a while. About the papers. About what Dad did. I believe you, I said. He stared at his mug. He didn't tell me anything. Mom either. I only found out because I overheard them arguing last night. She wants to list the house already. I blinked. Already? Andrew nodded. They're meeting with a realtor on Monday. Of course they were. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking a little. I didn't know how bad things had gotten. They hadn't, I said. Not until this. He looked up at me, eyes full of something I couldn't name. You don't deserve this. No, I said quietly. I don't. He hesitated. I've been thinking, if there's anything I can do. You're doing it now, I interrupted. By coming. We drank in silence for a few more minutes. Then he asked the question I'd been expecting. Why did you sign the house over to him in the first place? I leaned back, the chair creaking beneath me. Because I was tired. Because your grandfather had just passed. Because Gerald said all the right things. Andrew nodded, his jaw clenched. I want to help. If this goes to court, I can testify. I remember what Dad said about the house back when you signed. He told us all that you'd live here forever, that nothing would change. That might be helpful, I said, though I already planned to give Diane his name. He leaned forward. I meant what I said. I don't want this to happen. I don't want you to be alone. I reached out, placed my hand over his. I'm not alone. He stayed for an hour, helped me bring in the rest of the laundry, tightened the loose hinge on the screen door. Before he left, he hugged me tighter than usual. You let me know what happens, he said. Whatever you need. When he drove away, I stood on the porch and watched his taillights disappear down the street. That night, I baked. Apple crisp. Not for anyone in particular, just because I could. And when I sat down with a bowl in my lap and the scent of cinnamon warming the house, I felt something flicker deep in my chest. Not bitterness, not sadness. Something softer. Something like courage starting to take root. The office smelled faintly of lemon oil and printer paper. Diane had cleared the long table, and my file sat in front of her, thick now, full of tabs and clipped notes. I've looked through everything, she said, adjusting her glasses. And I think we have enough to move. Move? I echoed, setting my purse down. File for a declaratory judgment, she clarified. We'll argue that there was an implied right of residency, based on verbal assurances, your long-term occupancy, and the financial history between you and your son. We'll also include evidence of potential undue influence when the deed was transferred. I stared at the manila folder. And that could stop the eviction. It will, she said. At least temporarily. Once filed, it freezes all action. He can't sell the house, can't list it, can't remove you until the court hears the case. I let out a slow breath. Not relief yet. But the idea of time, my time, was a gift I didn't expect to hold again. I'll file it this afternoon, Diane said, and I'll have a courier deliver notice to your son's address. We'll also request a temporary injunction. Good, I said quietly. She hesitated. He might respond. Poorly. I'm counting on it, I said. She smiled faintly, then turned serious again. Helen, you should know, this kind of case can stir things up. Families split over less. I nodded. We split already. This is just paperwork. When I got home, the house felt different. Not warmer, not safer, but steadier. Like it had agreed to hold its ground with me. I put the kettle on and sat by the front window with my notebook. It was late afternoon. Golden light stretched across the wooden floor. I opened to the list I'd started days ago. People I can call who still know who I am. Andrew, Diane, Lorraine, if I can find her number. Mrs. Cates from next door. I added one more. Me. I may not have remembered it for a while, but I know who I am. The phone rang at 5:42. I let it go to voicemail, then checked the message 5 minutes later. It was Gerald. His voice was controlled, but clipped. Mom, I just got served something from a lawyer. I don't know what this is, but what the hell are you doing? Call me back. I didn't. He called again at 7:12. I can't believe this. After everything, this is how you respond? Then Mallory at 7:40. We should talk. This isn't helping anyone. I know you're upset, but court? Really? I muted the phone. Let them stew. At 8:30, I stepped outside. The sky was ink black, but the stars were out. I stood at the edge of the porch and breathed in the cold air. James would have approved. He always told me, "You don't fight with noise, Helen. You hold the line. Quietly. Until they notice you're not backing down." The line was drawn now, and I wasn't moving. Saturday morning came with sharp sun and cold wind. I stood in the garage with a wool scarf around my neck, rummaging through a stack of old boxes, looking for the winter blankets. My fingers were stiff, but I welcomed the ache. Pain meant I still had a body that answered back. I opened a box labeled James, office in my handwriting, faded now. Inside were files, a ledger, a jar of screws, and tucked under an envelope of utility receipts, letters. Not bills, not typed forms, actual letters, folded and yellowed. His handwriting, neat, deliberate, with a slant that always leaned left, like he was leaning in to tell you something, quietly. I sat on the workbench, the concrete floor cold through the soles of my shoes, and opened the top one. October 14th, 1992. Helen, if you're reading this, it means I've finally made it up to the lake without dragging you with me for once. I smiled. He'd taken those solo fishing trips every fall, swearing it cleared his mind. Truth was, he missed quiet more than fish. I don't say it enough, but this house? You made it a home. I built the walls, sure, but you built the days. If anything ever happens to me, make sure you stay here as long as you want. This place has your name written all over it, even if the papers say mine. I folded it carefully, hands trembling for a different reason now. The second letter was shorter, written on a napkin, of all things, probably from the garage or the truck. If Gerald ever tries to tell you this house should be his, remind him who scrubbed the floors and paid the mortgage and cooked every damn dinner. Remind him of you. It wasn't legal evidence, but it was something. A man's truth, put to paper without knowing it would one day be ammunition. I brought the letters inside and tucked them into the blue folder for Diane. Not as documents, as reminders. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pulled out the old photo album, the thick one with the cracked spine. James holding Gerald on his shoulders, laughing with his mouth wide open. Gerald at 7, holding a bent fishing rod with no fish on the end. Me in the background, holding a sandwich, half smiling. One of the last pages, Gerald, Mallory, baby Andrew. Christmas Eve. Tree lights blinking in the background. My apron dusted with flour. When had the warmth gone out of his face? Had it always been there, and I just stopped noticing? I shut the album and set it on the coffee table. Then I sat with the silence. Let it surround me. Let it say what needed to be said. You gave your life to something. Someone. Now you're not giving it away anymore. Lorraine hadn't changed much. Maybe her hair was whiter, maybe her back a little rounder, but her voice was still the same. Sharp, low, warm in a way that could burn or soothe, depending on where she aimed it. She brought banana bread, as always. Said she'd baked it before the bananas turned black. That was her rule. Don't wait for things to rot before you use them. We sat in the living room, the gas heater clicking faintly in the corner, the sun dragging long shadows across the carpet. She poured our tea. No milk, no sugar. Just like in 1976, when we used to drink it in the laundromat break room, balancing paper cups on our knees. So, she said, tearing off a corner of her slice. Gerald finally showed his teeth. I didn't ask how she knew. News like this moves through town faster than plumbing rumors. He did, I said, and you're fighting. I am. She nodded slowly. Took you long enough. I didn't flinch. I don't mean it cruel, she added. Just, Helen, you've been letting him take pieces of you for years. One birthday at a time, one check, one favor. All those little silences. And now he's come for the roof. I looked down at my cup. The tea had cooled, but I didn't mind. You always made excuses for him, she went on. Said he was busy, said he didn't mean to forget, said he was stressed. Meanwhile, you were the one baking, calling, showing up. I'm his mother, I said. No, she corrected. You were his backup plan. I didn't argue. Not this time. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded sheet. Remember this? I didn't at first, but when she smoothed it out on her lap, I saw it. An old flyer from a charity bake sale we'd done together in '89. My name under coordinator, hers under logistics. You used to run things, she said. You used to make things happen. I smiled faintly. I used to have 2 knees that worked. You still have a spine. We were quiet a while. Then she leaned forward. What are you afraid of, Helen? Losing him? Newsflash. You already did. It hit harder than I expected. You're not the problem, she said gently. You never were. But you made yourself small enough to fit into their world. And now they want to fold you up and store you away. I looked at her. Really looked. Lorraine had raised 3 daughters on her own. Worked nights. Fought breast cancer twice. She didn't say things just to say them. Do you regret it? I asked. Being tough with them when they got older? She shook her head. Not once. They still call me every week. Still ask my opinion. Not because I bought it, because I demanded it. I exhaled. Deep. Slow. She finished her tea and stood to go. At the door, she turned. You've still got fight in you. I see it. But don't waste it trying to be fair to people who've been unfair to you for years. Use it for you, Helen. Use it to take your life back. Then she left, the scent of banana bread lingering long after the door shut. I stood in the hallway for a long time, hand still on the knob. Then I whispered, almost to no one. Okay. The notice said I had until noon. At 8 a.m., I made coffee and fried 2 eggs, same as I did every Tuesday for the past 20 years. I didn't pack. Didn't touch the boxes Gerald had brought last week and stacked in the hall like tombstones. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the steam rise from my cup. Outside, the frost clung to the grass. The bare trees shivered in the wind. I could hear the garbage truck a block over. The world didn't care it was eviction day. Neither did the house. It creaked as usual, settled into its morning groan. The pipes whispered. The window panes blinked in the low winter sun. It didn't feel like goodbye. Not for me. At 9:15, a knock on the door. I didn't get up. Another knock, louder. Then the door opened. Gerald had a key, of course. He stepped inside with that same self-important stiffness he'd always carried when he thought he was being mature. "Mom," he called out, as if he hadn't crossed a line. "In here," I said. He came into the kitchen wearing a wool coat and a face like he'd already rehearsed his lines. I wanted to come early, get a head start. I brought movers. I sipped my coffee. They're waiting in the truck. Just give me an hour or so, and I'll help you settle into the apartment. I'm not going anywhere. His mouth twitched. Mom, don't do this. I've already done it. He blinked. Done what? Filed a motion, I said, reaching into the drawer and pulling out the court document Diane had sent over yesterday evening. The eviction is frozen until the hearing. Nothing happens today. He stared at the paper like it had bitten him. What is this? You're the one who likes paperwork, Gerald. Read it. He scanned the first few lines, then looked at me. You went to a lawyer? I did. His voice raised. You're making a mistake. This is going to cost money, stress. Do you even understand what you're doing? Yes, I said. For the first time in years, I understand exactly. He paced toward the window, then turned. You could have just talked to me. I tried. You brought me a court order, not a conversation. He rubbed his forehead. We don't have time for this. Mallory's expecting the house to be cleared. We have a realtor. Then call them. Tell them you overstepped. He clenched his jaw. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. You just didn't care if you did. We stood in silence for a long moment. Then he looked down, folded the paper, and shoved it in his coat pocket. This won't stop the process, he said, already heading toward the door. It just delays it. We'll see. He paused in the hallway, where his old trophies still sat dusty on the shelf. You really want this to be how we end? You ended it the day you brought movers into my home. The door shut behind him harder than necessary. I heard the truck start, then pull away. I sat there, not triumphant, not afraid. Just still. The house was still mine, for now. And that was enough. The movers returned 2 days later, but this time they didn't get out of the truck. I watched from the window as Gerald stood beside the van, phone pressed to his ear, face growing redder by the minute. He paced the driveway, pointed at the house, then finally gave up and waved the crew off. They left without lifting a single box. By now, the temporary court order had been processed, filed, recognized. The ink on the judge's signature was dry. Diane had called that morning to confirm, "You are protected until further ruling. No one touches the house. No one touches you." So when Gerald knocked again, I let him wait. Eventually, I opened the door. He stepped in like the floor was lava, like the place he grew up in was foreign. "I just came to talk," he said. "Funny," I replied. "That's what I wanted weeks ago." He didn't sit, didn't take off his coat. Just stood in the center of the room, staring at the same furniture he used to drape himself across as a teenager. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "We're not enemies." "No," I said. "Enemies are honest." He winced. "You really think I wanted to hurt you?" I didn't answer. He looked around. "You think this place is sacred?" "But it's just a house, Mom. Just walls and pipes and a leaky roof." "You're wrong," I said quietly. "This house remembers. Every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every meal I cooked with a body that never got to rest. Every winter your father patched the attic with his bare hands. It's not the walls, it's the years." He shook his head. "You can't live in memories." "I don't," I said. "I live in dignity, and I'm not trading it for your mortgage." He took a breath, long and sharp. "Mallory's furious." "She usually is." He didn't laugh. "I don't know what happened to you, Gerald," I said. "You used to bring me drawings, dandelions and fists. You used to cry when I scraped my hand on the garden gate." "That was a long time ago," he said. "Yes," I said. "It was." He looked tired suddenly, older than he did at the wedding, the last time I saw him really smile. "You said I could live here," I continued. "You stood in this room and told me it would always be mine, and I believed you, like a fool." He rubbed his eyes. "I was trying to make things easier. For you." He looked at me. "So what now?" "Now?" I said. "Now we wait. The court will decide. You had your say. Now I'll have mine." He nodded slowly, but his hands were fists in his coat pockets. "I didn't expect you to fight," he said. I stood straighter. "That's why you lost the first round." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Do you want me to call? Check in?" "No," I said. "If you have to ask, the answer's already no." The door shut softer this time. I sat down on the couch and exhaled. He would come back, maybe, or not. Either way, the door would only open on my terms now. Diane's office felt different the second time. Not because of the decor, it was the same wood grain furniture and muted carpet, but because I no longer felt like a problem being solved. I was a woman pursuing her right to stay standing. She handed me a thick folder across the desk. "We're filing the affidavit today. Official notice of your residency rights, plus witness statements and the letters." I touched the edge of the folder. "You think it'll hold?" She met my eyes. "I do. Especially with Andrew's statement. He was detailed, clear, mentioned exact dates, specific promises Gerald made, and his own memory of the day you signed the deed." I nodded. "He's a good boy. More than that, he's honest." We went through the next steps. A hearing scheduled for next month. A temporary injunction renewed until then. Diane would handle the filings. All I had to do was wait and prepare. "Is it normal," I asked, "to feel like I'm doing something wrong, even though I know I'm not?" She paused. "Yes," she said, "because you were taught to be agreeable, to be the bridge, not the wall." I let that sit. After I left the office, I didn't go straight home. I stopped by the notary. Signed new documents, re-established power of attorney, with Andrew. Then I went to the post office and mailed a letter to the county office requesting an updated property tax statement in my name, pending judgment. I wasn't delusional. The house wasn't mine on paper, but I'd stopped living like a guest. At home, I took the wedding photo of Gerald and Mallory off the mantel. It didn't hurt. I wrapped it in newspaper and slid it into a drawer, not to erase, just to put things in the right place. Then I sat at the dining room table and opened my old financial ledger, the one I used to track every grocery, every gift, every check I wrote with a sigh and a hopeful heart. I flipped to a blank page. At the top I wrote, "November revisions." Below that, "Mortgage on self-respect. Paid in full." At 4:10 p.m., the phone rang. I didn't answer. It rang again at 4:27 and 5:03. I let them all go. By 6:00, I was stirring soup on the stove, humming under my breath. Not a song I recognized, just something slow, something even. Then a knock at the door. It was Andrew. "Hope it's okay," he said, holding a small bag. "I brought chili." I smiled and stepped aside. "Good." I made cornbread. We sat together like two people who'd been through a storm and were drying off, each in our own corner of the same room. He told me about his classes. I told him about the court filing. He listened without flinching. "You did the right thing," he said. "I know," I said. "I just didn't know it could feel this quiet." He looked around. "Still feels like home to me." It is. Before he left, he hugged me, longer this time, like he meant it with every cell. After he drove off, I turned off all the lights except for the one in the hallway. James used to say a house should never go dark too early. It confuses the soul. I sat in that soft pool of light, listening to the silence. No ticking clock, no television, just breath and floorboards and memory. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was watching, and I wasn't done. The next morning, I found an envelope tucked inside the storm door. No stamp, no name. Inside was a note, handwritten in rushed, slanted lines. "Gerald's. Mom, please don't do this. You're making everything worse. The boys are asking questions. Mallory can't sleep. You're tearing this family apart over a house. This was never meant to be permanent. You knew that. Let's talk. Let's fix this before it goes too far." I folded the letter in half and placed it on the mantel between the candle holders. Let it sit there like a warning, not to me, but to the silence. The boys are asking questions. I imagined it. Gerald spinning the story over dinner? Mallory sighing loud enough for sympathy. Poor grandma's not well. She's confused. She's being influenced. She doesn't understand what's best. But I did. At 11:32 a.m., the doorbell rang again. This time, I looked through the peephole. Mallory. I opened the door, but only halfway. "Hello, Helen," she said. I waited. She glanced at her phone, then put it away. "I won't take much of your time. I thought maybe we could talk, woman to woman." "You had your chance," I said. "I know," she said quickly. "And I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to get this legal. It's just—" Gerald panicked. "We thought you'd want something simpler, safer." I opened the door wider, not to welcome her, to let her see my face, my steadiness. "You mean smaller?" She swallowed. "I know it feels like betrayal." "It is betrayal." She blinked. "Helen, we have 2 kids in school, a mortgage, and a pending relocation. We're trying to plan a future. And I'm trying to hold on to what I already built," I said. Mallory looked toward the street, as if searching for an ally. "Andrew's in the middle of all this now. It's not fair to him." "He's fine," I said. "He's telling the truth." She straightened. "Do you know how much this is costing us? Lawyers, delays, time? Less than what you tried to take from me." Her mouth pressed into a line. "Gerald thinks you're being vindictive." "No," I said. "I'm being very, very fair." She took a breath. "We're family. That's what makes it worse." For a moment, I saw it. The realization that her tone, her visits, her baked goods were all currency that no longer worked here. She stepped back. "If you change your mind, I won't." I closed the door. That night, I got a voicemail from one of the boys, the older one, Thomas. "Hi, Grandma," he said, his voice uncertain. "Dad said you're mad. I hope you're okay. We miss you." I listened to it twice, not because I doubted its sincerity, but because I heard the weight behind it. The use. The way Gerald always spoke through other people when he wanted to stay clean. I didn't call back. Not because I didn't love Thomas, but because I wouldn't let love be turned into a leash. Instead, I sat in my bedroom and opened a drawer full of old Christmas cards. One from Gerald, 15 years ago, said, "Thanks for the help again. We couldn't have done it without you." Another from Mallory. "You're always so generous. We're lucky to have you. Generous, helpful, never irreplaceable, never necessary. Just convenient." That season was over. I wasn't the net beneath their tightrope anymore. I was the ground, and they'd feel it. The first letter came on a Wednesday. It was tucked in with the usual pile of bills and catalogs I never ordered. Handwritten address. No return name. Inside was a note card, blue, with a pressed flower in the corner. "Helen, I heard what's happening. I just wanted to say, good for you. Not many people have the courage to stand up the way you are. If you ever want someone to sit on the porch with, call me. Judy Cates, next door with the barking terrier." I stood at the sink and read it twice. I hadn't spoken to Judy in more than polite greetings and shared complaints about recycling pickups. But somehow she knew, and she understood. The next day, another letter. This one from a woman named Marcia, who used to come to me for bookkeeping years ago. "Mrs. Kirkwood, I remember how patient you were with me when I was struggling to keep my little salon afloat. You never once made me feel stupid. You saved me more than once. I saw your name in the clerk docket. I don't know what your son's doing, but I'm rooting for you. I owe you more than you know." Then another. A postcard from someone I didn't even recognize at first. One of James's old co-workers. James always said you were the smartest person in the room. Looks like you still are. Keep going. The quiet ones win in the end. I put the cards in a small basket on the end table, not because I needed to prove anything, but because I wanted to remember what it sounded like to be seen clearly. Not managed, not tolerated. Seen. On Saturday, I was on the porch with a blanket over my knees when Judy herself walked up with a thermos. "Chamomile," she said. "You always seemed like a chamomile woman." She sat down without asking and poured us each a cup. "I hope you don't mind," she said, "but I'm glad you're fighting back." I looked at her. "You think I have a chance?" She sipped. "Honey, even if you don't win the house, you already won the truth." We sat there while the wind rattled the gutters. "People think aging makes you soft," she said. "What it really does is peel the bark off. What's left is just the wood. Some strong, some rotted through. You've still got your grain." I laughed. A small sound, but real. "I used to think silence was strength," I said. She nodded. "So did I, until it became the thing they used against me." We didn't talk much after that. Just sat and drank. When she left, she squeezed my hand. "No matter what happens, don't let them write the ending." I watched her walk back across the lawn, little dog barking at her heels. That night, I lit one candle in the kitchen. Just one. It was enough. The house was quiet, but not empty. Something had changed. I was no longer waiting for rescue. I had become my own witness. Courtrooms aren't like in the movies. There's no echo, no gavel slamming for drama. Just old carpet, dry air, and the faint smell of burnt coffee from a machine that probably hasn't been cleaned since the Bush administration. Gerald sat 2 rows ahead of me, next to Mallory, who wore black like it was a funeral. He didn't look back. I didn't expect him to. Diane sat beside me, calm as ever, her folders neat, her tabs visible. She had prepped me for the questions. Be clear, be truthful, be steady. The judge was a woman. 60-something, no-nonsense face, glasses on a chain. She glanced at the documents, then at me. "Mrs. Kirkwood, you've requested the court recognize an implied right of residence. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "You signed the deed to your son voluntarily?" "I did." "But you're claiming that there was a verbal understanding that you would live in the house for the rest of your life?" "Yes." "Was this understanding witnessed?" "It was stated in front of my grandson, Andrew Kirkwood. He submitted a statement." The judge nodded, flipped pages, turned to Gerald's lawyer. "Your client claims there was no such agreement?" "That's correct." "Mr. Kirkwood asserts that the house was gifted outright, that his mother never requested a lifetime clause, nor was one offered." The judge turned back to me. "Mrs. Kirkwood, why did you transfer the deed?" "Because I trusted my son." "And when did you learn that he intended to sell the home?" "When he brought me an eviction notice, without warning." That landed. Even Mallory shifted in her seat. Diane stood and presented the letters, James's handwriting, his words about the house. Then Andrew's statement. Then the tax records, showing that I had paid utilities and repairs since James died. My name, not Gerald's, on every maintenance invoice, every roofing estimate, every plumber's receipt. The judge didn't flinch, didn't show preference, but her questions told me everything. "Mr. Kirkwood," she asked, "when your mother transferred the deed, did you assure her she could remain in the home?" He stood. His voice was measured, but thin. "I might have said something like that. but I didn't think it was permanent. Did you communicate any time limit? No, but it was implied. On paper? No. The judge leaned back. I see, she said. Then she looked at me again. I find it reasonable to believe that a verbal agreement existed between you and your son regarding your right to remain in the home. Given your consistent financial contributions, your long-standing occupancy, and the documented statements provided, I am granting an injunction against the eviction. Further, I am initiating proceedings to review the original deed transfer for potential reversal on grounds of undue influence and lack of informed consent. She paused. You may remain in the home until this process concludes. Given the circumstances, I advise both parties to seek mediation. Diane thanked her. I didn't speak. Not because I was shocked, but because I finally felt something I hadn't in months. Weightless. Gerald didn't turn as he left. Mallory brushed past me like I was furniture. Outside, the air was cold and clean. I didn't rush to the car. I just stood there for a moment, coat buttoned to my throat, sun in my eyes. Diane put a hand on my arm. You were perfect. I wasn't angry, I said. I thought I'd be angry. You didn't need to be, she said. Truth doesn't yell. Back at home, I walked room to room like I was meeting the house for the first time, not reclaiming it, but acknowledging what it already knew, that I had always belonged here, and that now, finally, the law had caught up with the truth. The letter from the court came 3 weeks later. It was thin, just 2 pages, but the weight of it might as well have been bricks. I read it once standing up, once sitting down, and once again with my hand resting on James's old chair. The deed would not be reversed. Too much time had passed, too many legal bindings set. But the ruling was clear. I had the right to remain in the house until my death, or until I chose to leave. No sale, no eviction, no transfer. They called it a life estate by estoppel. I called it dignity on paper. The next day, I opened every window in the house, not out of celebration, just to let the truth breathe. The wind moved through the rooms gently, like it had been waiting. In the weeks that followed, Gerald didn't call. Neither did Mallory. Not even a note from the boys. And strangely, that didn't ache the way I thought it would. I missed them, yes. I missed the idea of them. The little hands, the soft questions, the holidays that felt full. But I didn't miss the weight of being tolerated. Andrew came by every Saturday, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just himself. He never brought up the court or his father. He just sat, drank tea, and told me about his life. I let him. Judy and I started a routine. Thursday evenings on the porch. She'd bring wine. I'd bring stories. She told me once that she hadn't heard herself laugh in years. Until me. I started baking again. Not because anyone asked, just because the house felt more itself when it smelled like cinnamon or clove. I sent a loaf to the post office girls, another to the church pantry. People started writing back. One afternoon, a woman knocked on my door. Early 40s, hair pulled back tight, nervous smile. "I'm sorry," she said. "Are you Mrs. Kirkwood?" "I am." She held out a wrapped bundle. Banana bread. "I just wanted to thank you. My mom's in the same situation. Different town. But your story made it to her. She's fighting now, too." I took the bread. "She'll win." "I think she will," the woman said. She said, "If a lady named Helen in Carolina could do it, so could she." I smiled. "Tell her Helen said she's right." She left. I stood at the door a long time, bread in my hands, heart quiet. They were calling it my story now, as if I'd written it. But really, all I'd done was refuse the ending someone else tried to give me. And maybe that's what strength is. Not lifting, not shouting, just staying. Holding your name in your mouth like a prayer and saying, no, not this. That spring, I planted roses again. Red ones, like James used to bring from the hardware store each April, even when we didn't have money for anything but bread and gas. And when the first bloom opened, stubborn and alive, I touched the petals and whispered, see, still here. Because I was. Because I am. Because I stayed.